Mike's on Mike, a conversation about politics, government, and Jacksonville, with 50-year opinion leaders Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and award-winning broadcaster and longtime political observer, Mike Miller.
Welcome once again to another episode of Mike's on Mike. I'm Mike Miller here in studio. My two colleagues, Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, are both in their respective homes out of the city, so they're joining us remotely, and we're happy to have them with us. And of course, the program is brought to you by our friends at the Jacksonville Historical Society, which is located inside the Jacksonville History Center. And our thanks, as always, to Alan Bliss and the fine donors who help keep this program going. After we've had a few weeks of really great guests, today we thought it would be just the three Mikes offering our observations, insights, and perceptions about some of the current issues that are facing us here in Jacksonville today. There's a lot to discuss, true, but we're going to do three of those issues. The newly named Duval County School Superintendent and what he and Jacksonville will be facing when he starts his new position this summer. The second will be the City Council as a new special committee that is intended to examine the Downtown Investment Authority as well as just all of the progress of downtown and what we can do to move some of these projects along a little faster. And then finally, we want to check out the tenor and the perceptions, if you will, of the general public with the new Jaguars stadium and the $1.4 billion package, which is going to the City Council here in the next couple of weeks. So let's start out with the new superintendent, Mike Tolbert. When the school board voted unanimously last week to appoint Dr. Bernier from Lee County, it appeared that all was great and that Bernier and the board members were all getting along very well. It was a unanimous thought, but you say there may be more to it, correct?
Well, I'm not sure there's more to it, but on face value, what you saw, it looks like they're all in agreement. But you know, there's some really, really dark, ominous clouds over education in Duval County and the state of Florida. And this guy's going to have to navigate all those things over the next several months and maybe a couple of years. You know, we've talked about this before. We've got decreasing enrollment as more and more parents are moving their children into private schools, going to charter schools. We know that the half-penny sales tax now looks like it's $1 billion or more short of what we hoped it would produce to renovate public schools. The board is looking to consolidate or close schools, which is getting significant community pushback. And then there's the politics of all of it. You know, in Jacksonville and Duval County and in the state of Florida, with some of the actions by the governor and the Florida legislature and the Moms of Liberty. So I don't know that it's going to be smooth sailing, even though he got a unanimous vote. I know all the board members approved of him, but I'm hearing that it was not with great passion among some of them.
What do you think is going to be the greatest challenge? Is it the most visible one, obviously, is the question of the consolidation of the schools and the possible closing of some of the schools. That's really hit the emotional chord of people who are interested in the school system. But do you think that that's the most important issue, or do you think it has more to do with the money that they're not able to get for the infrastructure work that they wanted to do with the half cent?
I think, you know, this is just me, but I think the biggest, hardest obstacle to overcome is going to be the political environment. The assault on public education by charter schools that's coming out of the legislature and the governor's office. Then that's going to be long term. There's no quick fix to that we can think about. So I think that may have a bigger impact over the long haul. We can always reduce the number of buildings we're going to build, and we can always change the number of schools we're going to close or consolidate. But until that horror story goes away, public education in Florida and in Duval County particularly is facing some tough times.
Mike Tolbert, I don't disagree, except that when the reports that I have read is that the new superintendent is a close friend of the Commissioner of Education, Manny Diaz, and who was chosen by the governor. So I think on the political side, I think, as opposed to the past superintendent, who was at odds with both the governor and the Commissioner of Education. And my understanding, and again, I picked this up, from some of the tweets and stuff going on, is that the governor and Commissioner Diaz are fans of Moms of Liberty. So I think from a political perspective, I think that the superintendent may be more aligned with the governor, the Commissioner of Education, and the Moms of Liberty. So I think in that respect, I think that, to your point, and all that group, my understanding is that group is a huge advocate for choice, which comes to charter, which I think comes to the issue of the people who in Duval County may not be great advocates of charter for a number of reasons. But one of the reasons is, as you know, with charter schools or with choice, if the student leaves and goes to a charter school or something else, then the money that student has follows it, which I guess leads to the issue, which we've discussed on this show for many times, is the enrollment in Duval County is really falling at a pretty substantial rate, which is my understanding. You all have been doing this as long as I have, which is, I think, one of the rationales for the closing of some of these schools.
It's all tied together. It's all tied together, and it begins and ends with the politics going on in the state of Florida right now. That's causing charter schools to take away public school money. It's causing public school students to leave public schools and go to charter schools, or to get vouchers to go to private schools. And it's depleting public education funds, and it's bastardizing the school system.
There's a line of thinking and a feeling that's very strong. I think because of everything that you've laid out, Mike Colbert, is that is driving this issue with the closing of some of these schools, which has become the third rail, because those schools, at least I know of 4 of them that are on the block to be merged, are some of the schools that have been neighborhood schools, and we know how that is when you touch them, but they've been top of the line. So you're taking 2 or 3, 4 of the top elementary schools, maybe combining them into 2, which is really causing a problem. So to your point, Mike Colbert, it is all related. I think to me, that's going to be the first issue he's got to deal with, is that when the school board looks at closing these schools, the issue that I do think that we need to be thinking about, which maybe one of y'all know that, is that my understanding that was some of the schools that were in the really, in the Northwest quadrant, some of the areas that have been in most need of rebuilding, renovation, whatever you want to call it, with the price of everything going up, are those schools still in line to be brought up to standards? And I have not heard that. Maybe you all have. But that's been one of the issues to me that is really, it goes back to the promises made and the promises not kept in certain parts of this community. And that bothers me more than anything.
Well, and we brought this up to Lori Hershey when she was on the program a few weeks ago, and we said, is there a list of these different projects, and in what order are they going to be? Similar to what was done with the Better Jacksonville plan, where City Council had a list of every project that the BJP was going to address, and in what order. And as you guys may remember, and I think our audience will probably as well, is that there were a number of projects that were below the line. And it was stated at the time by the administration, by Delaney's administration, that we're not going to be able to do those that are below the line unless those that are above the line come in less expensively than what we are estimating the cost to be. And if one of them dropped off, or if there was money left over after doing the above the line projects, then the next first one below the line would come up and would be one that would be addressed. We have not done that with the schools.
Well, I don't know that that's true, Mike Beller. I don't know that that's true. That to get the half-penny sales tax, that had to be done, just like Delaney did it with the Better Jacksonville plan. And there's a I think it's a 20-person citizens committee that meets on a regular basis to review progress and to check those things. So that's I don't think that that's a true statement that there's not a list. They pretty much know exactly what they want to try to do. they don't have the money to do it now.
Well, that I think is the question, at least in my mind, is, y'all know this, we're like, is it 2 billion? I can't remember what the penny sales tax is, but what was it supposed to be?
It was more than that.
I think it was $1 billion or $1.5 billion. I think it was $1.5 billion.
Right. And so, I think we talked about this before, it was in the paper, that it's now looking that if we do everything that's on the list, as you were talking about, that number would go to 3 billion, which is one of the reasons why there'd be some drop. So to your point, what gets dropped off?
I don't know that, because we don't know, that somebody doesn't know. I mean, I can't imagine that they're just sitting there. How do they know how much more they need if they don't know what they got on their list? It's not, it didn't come out of thin air. And so I know that committee meets on a regular basis to review these things. Now, maybe the school board could do a better job, and the school system could do a better job of communicating what's going on with those projects and with that half penny than they have. I don't know why, and I don't know if that's a good statement or not, because I don't know what they've been doing or not been doing. But certainly you can't. There's no way to over communicate with the public. You just can't over communicate. So whatever they've done, they may even overstep it up a little bit.
Let me ask you this, Mike, since you brought it up, Mike Tolbert, you brought it up. I consider myself to be somewhat of a news junkie, and I'm normally staying up with everything that I possibly can, but I don't recall reading much at all about the state's involvement with the candidates that were in line to possibly become our superintendent. You mentioned that Bernier does have a close relationship, I guess, with the governor and with Manny Diaz in the Department of Education. But to be perfectly blunt with you, this is the first time I've actually really heard that.
Well, my understanding is, and I may be incorrect, that Diaz wrote a letter of recommendation. And actually, Mike Miller, that my recollection is that is one of the things that the people some of the stronger supporters of this fellow, one of the reasons they thought he ought to be the superintendent is because of his close connections with Diaz in the governor's office.
All right, let's go on and talk about that special committee that's appointed by the council president, Ron Salem, to examine the efficacy of the Downtown Investment Authority and also to try to put some kind of emphasis on how do we want to look at downtown investment and how do we want to attack that. Mr. Hightower, you've got that one. Do you want to give us some more of your thinking on that one?
That's like, well, I'm not sure I'll be able to give you much insight, but here's what I'm understanding. When President Salem announced the committee, he said that since the DIA was created by Mayor Alvin Brown in 2012, the progress of downtown development has been, and I quote, debatable at best, not good. Now, when DIA CEO Lori Boyer was on our show, Mike's on Mike, some time back, if I remember, guys, she painted a pretty rosy picture that highlights the success of the new residents living downtown. Right after her appearance, we learned that most of all the tall buildings being planned were either delayed or scrapped. Then we had Dr. Wayne Wood on afterwards, who talked about saving the historic buildings in downtown, particularly the Laura Street Trio and from City Hall to the river. We got a picture from him of a system that was out of whack with attention in all the wrong places. What do you think this committee is going to accomplish? And I think, I don't know what you can accomplish if you don't know what the problem is and what, according to, you got at least two who are saying something's not going on, and you got Lori as the CEO of DIA saying everything's going on. So I don't know where we are, gentlemen, to be honest with you.
Mr. Tolbert, what's your take on this?
Well, yeah, and Hightower's kind of hitting around it. There seems to be more questions than there are answers. One of the big issues that most people seem to agree on is that Jacksonville's definition of downtown is just way too damn big. There seems to be a group growing that believes instead of having the emphasis from that includes Brooklyn and San Marco, all these other places, the South Bank, that it ought to be shrunk to include to focus on the historic district in downtown, which would primarily be beginning at the City Hall building there, which is what used to be a May Coins, and coming down Laura Street to the river, which would take into Laura Street Trio and other really important Snyder Memorial Church, other historic buildings. There's a big effort to do that. And there's this seemed to be a lingering concern that not going to go away anytime soon, that what in the hell is going on with the former landing site down on the river? Is it going to be a public park that people can come to and enjoy? Or is it going to be a park with a restaurant on the river and a big 40-story office building on one end of it? What is it going to be? When are they going to decide that? And how in the hell are they going to move that project forward? And then finally, I'm wondering if this committee, if they really will get into the tenure of Lori Boyer and look at what she's accomplished or not accomplished and what the future of the DIA is, and should the DIA be changed around it all. So they've got a lot of work cut out for them. We'll see sooner than later what they plan to do and how they're going to move forward if they move forward.
Well, now, Mike Talbert, now you've been around City Hall a lot closer than a lot of us, but, President Salem is in his last 30 days, thereabouts, being city council president, because, and when the new city council president gets there, they come in with their own priorities. I'm wondering, is this special committee going to be a top priority for the new president?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but in Councilman Carrico right now heading the list to be vice president, and I think he's going to chair this committee. So I would assume, while it may be violation of Sunshine Law, that they have some kind of an agreement between Ron Salem, the current president, Kevin Carrico, the next vice president, and the incoming president, that they're going to mess with that committee. They're going to support that committee. I think Ron Salem probably had some kind of understanding of that before he embarked on this toward the end of his term.
Well, for what it's worth, it said here that White wants to finish the job he started with Salem, the current president. At a March leadership meeting, White said that his goals would be to finish the Jaguars deal and solidify the plans for the construction of the new county jail. Those are the two top priorities that he said. He didn't say anything else about downtown infrastructure work or any of the development or any of that sort, just those two items, which of course are the two biggest ticket items that we're facing as a community, with multi-billion dollars of investments that go into each one of those. So we may have to wait to hear about others.
We're talking about possibly in excess of $2 billion. So I would imagine that should be a top priority. One, how are we going to pay for it? And two, is it going to get built? And when's it going to get built? So,
well, the politics being what they are, I cannot imagine for Council President Ron Salem announcing and starting this initiative toward the end of his term if there was not some understanding by the incoming president, who has been his vice president, and the incoming vice president, that this project will go on. Otherwise, they would have stopped it already, I believe. I don't think they would have just created it, done all this fanfare, then to simply shut the track down and tell the train to go away.
Well, let's hope it gets addressed, because I mean, how many months and years have we been talking about getting downtown, get it started, get it put let's get it a smart plug. We got to jump start it. Been going on for many moons. Let's just hope. Hopefully, this committee is going to look at it. That's a hell of a statement, though, for him to say for Salem to say downtown is debatable at best. I think you're right, Mike Colbert. That's strong words. And if Randy White is going to finish up what Salem did, then maybe we'll get a definition of what debatable at best is, or how we're going to rectify it. Let's talk about the stadium. Mayor Deegan of Jaguars have had community huddles to explain the $1.4 billion deal and allow citizens to ask questions. From reports in the media, everything seems to be very friendly, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of pushback or hostility to the taxpayer investing, at least the number that got rolled out somewhere around, from our perspective, city anyway, of $750 million. It kind of reminds me of the difference, Mike Tolbert, when we were involved with our Jacks when Lot J came up, and the mayor and the Jaguars floated out the Lot J proposal, and it was rather embarrassing for the Jaguars. If I remember correctly, the mayor kept saying that he had 10 votes, and if I remember correctly, gentlemen, Mr. Tolbert knew a number of hours before anybody else is that the Magnificent Seven, there were not the votes there for Lot J. So, it seems like we're on a better positive track between this administration and a partnership with the Jags as opposed to the former administration. But again, it's a lot of money out there. So I think that by the community conversations that the Jaguars are having now, I think it's totally different than what happened before. I think we're in a better place. Mike Miller, you were at one of those. I think you were at the first community huddle, and as my saying was that Mark Lamping, who is the face of the Jaguars, did a great job, which is, I think, one of the outcomes from the debacle of Lot J, is that Mark Lamping heard from a number of city officials and city leaders, Mark, you need to be out there talking because nobody does it better than you. So would you not agree that this first huddle was good and Mark Lamping did a great job?
Yeah, he did. In fact, so did Mike Weinstein and the mayor, for that matter. All three of them did a great job. But keep in mind, though, they were in front of a very friendly audience. They were in my area. They were at FSCJ on Bay Meadows. And so that was a pretty friendly crowd. What I do understand is the second huddle was up in the north and western area. I'm trying to recall, and I apologize for not remembering exactly where it was, but it was at a community center in Northwest. And the crowd was not nearly as supportive as they were at the meeting that I was attending. And from what I understand, the biggest issue that was raised at that second meeting that I didn't attend had to do more with the community benefits agreement than it did with the actual money that would be spent on the stadium itself. But we all have to keep in mind that City Council has not yet seen the full bill, I don't believe. Aren't there something like 7 separate pieces of legislation that make up this package, and that they're going to have to vote on all 7 of them? The stadium finances is just one aspect of this thing. Then you get in the community benefits agreement and other things that are part of, I believe, separate legislation. And of course, there is no legislation currently for the development around the stadium. Remember, that was in the initial proposal, that there would be the stadium renovation and then the development, what I call Lot J Max, that was going to take place around the stadium, outside of that stadium. So that's not in the current legislation from any of the bills that I understand, though I've not seen them yet, and I'm hoping to get a summary of them or a copy of them to read, but it's hundreds of pages long. So I have a feeling a lot of city council members are going to come back and say, well, the devil's in the details. Let's take a look and see all the legislation when it comes to us first, and then I'll have a better idea of whether or not I can support it. But in general, there's no question they want to do the stadium. They understand they have to.
I get a sense that even though this is not a true statement, that it seems to me like it's pretty much a done deal. The mayor laid out a schedule for negotiations, and she kept that train running on time. And I said a while ago, you can't over-communicate with the public. And it looks like to me the mayor's office and the Jaguars are really communicating. And I go back to what Hightower said about Ly J. They totally butched that. And now they've learned to take a different approach, which they did with the hotel, and it works for them. They call this the second go round of huddles. They did huddles around the hotel over there on the river, and I don't sense any kind of public organized opposition to this yet. And I would have thought by now, if there was going to be an effort to derail it, it would have raised his head. So I haven't seen any of that. And nobody on the council at this point has suggested that it should go to a public referendum, even though that recent poll from UNF said that 74% or 72% of the voters would rather have it on a referendum. And the mayor, of course, has dug in and said that's not going to happen on her watch because she was elected to make the tough decisions. So I just think this thing, I'm not like you, Mike Miller. I see this thing keeping on schedule and moving along, no matter how many bills they have.
Well, I think at the end of the day it's going to pass, and I hope it does, to be perfectly honest with you, because I'm not sure we really have a choice, and that has been stated time and time again. Even at the huddle that I was at, it was brought up at least twice, if not three times, that we really don't have a choice in this if we want to keep the Jaguars. That's what it is. But there's another very interesting argument, which I think is going to make an impact, and I'm starting to hear it more and more now on the news, and that is that even if we didn't do this deal, we still have to come up with $150 million to make improvements with the stadium in its current condition for it to be able to stay viable for our next number of years. So they're kind of saying we can either do the whole thing and take it in one big bite, or we may have to do it in bite-sized pieces by spending $150 million to bring it up to code, and then whatever other costs that are going to go into it. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to pass.
Yeah, gentlemen, if you all remember when we had Mike Corrigan on last week, remember he made the comment. He said, he was on the council when it first came up, and he said, we made that decision 30 years ago that we wanted we wanted the Jaguars, and so 30 years later, we got to finish and step up and make this second commitment. So I think to Mike Tolbert's comment, I think that the Mark Lamping and the mayor have done, I think, to date, have done an incredible job of going out there. And as Mike Tolbert says, at least give people a chance to hear their complaints, hear their thoughts. But at the end of the day, it's up to the people in the decision making, which I guess is the mayor and the city council. And I totally agree with Mike Tolbert. You can't over communicate with the public. It's when you try to keep them out, and that's when you get in trouble. And then to the point, both the hotel and with the Jaguar Stadium, Mark Lamping and the mayor and Mike Weinstein, they've been out there talking with people. So that's how you do it successfully.
Well, between now and the time the stadium deal gets to council, we're going to have plenty more discussion on this. In fact, over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about the stadium. Our guest next week is Times Union reporter David Bauerlein. David has been covering the Jaguars and this whole stadium deal since day one. We're going to be getting his overview of it, and perhaps we'll learn a lot more about some of the other legislation that's going to be accompanying the original bill. And then in the third week, we're going to have Jaguars President Mark Lamping here with us. We're still working on week 2, but over the next 3 programs, we're going to be focusing on the stadium deal, so we hope you'll be watching and listening to each one of those. And don't forget to catch our podcast on our Facebook page, on our website, mikesonmike.com, or, of course, wherever you catch your favorite podcasts. Again, our thanks to the Jacksonville Historical Society, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks for joining us.
Mike's on Mike with Mike Tolbert, Mike Hightower, and Mike Miller can be found on your favorite podcasting platform, Facebook, and YouTube. Visit the website at mikesonmike.com. Join us next time for more conversation with Mike's on Mike.
Mike.